Hello, and welcome to the Kofax Enablement Videos on Demand. This video will demonstrate how to disable the ForceValid button in validation. The ForceValid button allows a user to bypass a required field without entering data or following the validation rules applied to that field. This can be a useful feature, but on the flip side, it can also be a negative feature by allowing invalid data to enter the system. You may want to disable this feature for specific users or even all of the users. I have the KTA validation form open. You will notice that the user is presented with a date field and cannot leave the field until a properly formatted date value is entered. I will attempt to put in an invalid date. This will violate a validation rule and the user will not be able to leave the field until they put in a proper date. As I type in an invalid date, it does not let me leave. Now, if the user clicks the ForceValid button up here, this little button on the toolbar, it will allow the user to complete the field, putting invalid data into that field and moving them on to the next activity. This is not what we want. We want to disable this functionality, and I will show you how. The ForceValid functionality cannot be disabled through the configuration options in the TA Designer. You can, however, disable all of the other buttons on the validation and folder review toolbars, just not the ForceValid button. To disable the other buttons on the toolbar, this can be accomplished through the designer by opening up the TA Designer, clicking the System Settings, and finally choosing Capture from the Access Permissions. This is a list of all the different toolbar options you can disable. You'll notice Force Validate is not on here, but all the other buttons are. Before we disable the Force Valid button, we have a house cleaning item that we need to take care of. And that is the users can actually use a keyboard shortcut command to execute the Force Valid. So we need to disable that. Here I'm in the system settings, and inside the system settings there's an option called configurable keys. If we open up the configurable keys and scroll down, you'll see there's one option in here called ForceValid. If I open up the ForceValid, you can see it's set to double, the control, and the V. If I change this to single and then make sure nothing is checked here, this is no longer a keyboard command that can be executed. Real important, make sure you hit the update button here, and then don't forget to hit save. So I hit the save button. It's going to ask me to restart IIS and total agility. So do those items, and then that will take effect and the Control V keyboard shortcut command will no longer work. Now it's time to disable the ForceValid button inside of validation. So this is done by opening up your validation form in the Form Designer. To do that, we choose Form Designer and then select the appropriate form. Now that we have our form open, the first thing we need to do is create a new action. This is done by clicking Actions from the toolbar and then clicking the plus sign next to Actions to create a new action. The action type that we're going to choose from the action type list is JavaScript. Then we need to give the JavaScript action a name. In this case, I'm going to call it JS disable force valid. And finally, we need to write some JavaScript code. In this case, I already have it in my clipboard and I'm just going to paste it in here. You have two choices here. You can copy this off of the screen here, or you can copy and paste it from the description of this video. Once my JavaScript code is in place, I hit OK and then go back to the designer. With the action created, we need to apply the action to an event on the form so that the action will trigger. The action needs to be placed in the onFormLoaded event. You can access the onFormLoaded event by going to the extended properties of the form. I usually do this by clicking somewhere outside of the cells and the rows on the form, typically in this white space right here, then clicking the extended properties button of the form. This takes me to all the events on the form. Make sure you click the events tab from this window. Click the actions menu to load all the actions. I've got a long list of actions here, but one tip is your most newly created action will typically be at the bottom. And here's my JavaScript disable force valid action. I place this at the bottom of my loaded events. Very important, make sure it's after take pending activity and after validation control load batch action in order for it to work. Once all this is created, and added properly, I click the close button. Now we are ready to release and save our form and test it and see how it all works out. To ensure the ForceValid button is disabled, I'm going to test this in validation. I have the validation module open, and I am again required to type in a valid date. First, I'm going to try to type in an invalid date. As I do this, the system will not allow this, and it says the date field does not contain a valid date. To get past this, I'm going to just press the ForceValid button. But as you can see, the ForceValid button is disabled, and I cannot use this button anymore. So as an operator, I am forced to type in a valid date to progress this to the next activity. So I will do that. I type in the valid date, I confirm the field, and I am moving on to the next activity. Now you know how to disable the ForceValid button, and thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.